husband humiliated her because of infertility, until the Alpha King marked her. They say the goddess blesses every she-wolf with the gift of creation, but what they don't tell you is what happens when she takes it back, or when everyone believes she has. I learned the truth in a wheat field, standing before my husband and half the territory's packs, while Sepp Gilson announced my barrenness like a proclamation from the goddess herself. 5 years, Sepp's voice carried across the golden field, his hand gripping mine, not in comfort, but on display. 5 years I've given her every advantage, the best healers, the finest herbs, my own blood and sweat trying to plant a seed in barren ground. His fingers tightened until my bones ground together. The goddess has spoken. This union is cursed. The crowd rippled with whispers. Some faces showed pity, others barely concealed their satisfaction. I'd become the pack's favorite tragedy, the cautionary tale mothers told their daughters, the name mentioned in worried whispers when a she-wolf's cycle ran late. I, Sepp Gilson, beta of the Crescent Vale Pack, hereby dissolve this bond. He released my hand like it burned him. Let no wolf question my right to a fertile mate. Let no one claim I didn't honor the old laws. My throat closed. 5 years of trying, failing, bleeding month after month, while the pack's sympathy curdled into contempt. 5 years of Sepp's increasingly rough attempts to fix me, his mother's bitter moonsbane tea that was supposed to cleanse my womb. The pack healer's pitying examinations, dried up, broken, cursed. I'd believed every word. I've already chosen her replacement. Sepp gestured toward the crowd, where a girl barely 20 stood with downcast eyes. Young, proven, fertile, everything a beta's wife should be. The wheat field spun. This was my execution, public and precise. Not death, but erasure. Does anyone challenge this dissolution? Sepp's voice held a dare. In pack law, only an alpha could override a beta's divorce claim, and our alpha had died 3 months ago, leaving us in political chaos. The silence stretched like a blade. Then a voice cut through it, deep, cold, carrying the weight of ancient authority. I do. Every head turned. The crowd parted like water. Alpha King Joke Groliman stood at the edge of the wheat field, storm-gray eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He'd been observing the festival from the ceremonial platform, a courtesy visit to a pack in transition. I'd seen him from a distance, dark hair, warrior's build, the kind of presence that made wolves drop their gazes. Now he was walking toward me, toward us. Sepp's face went white. Your Majesty, this is a pack matter. It stopped being a pack the moment I scented my mate. The Alpha King's words fell like hammer blows. His eyes never left mine. 5 seconds after I arrived at your festival, to be precise. My heart stopped. The crowd's whispers exploded into shocked exclamations. That's impossible, Sepp snarled. She's been my wife for 5 years. If she were anyone's true mate, the bond was there. Joke stopped 3 feet away, his gaze finally shifting to Sepp with something like contempt. Buried under whatever you've been doing to her. But a true mate bond doesn't die just because you tried to suffocate it. He turned back to me, and the world narrowed to his storm-gray eyes. Your name, Omega. Morgan. My voice came out broken. Morgan Coates. Morgan. He spoke it like a prayer, like a claim. I am Joke Groliman, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, I invoke the law of true mates. Your marriage is void. You belong to me." Sep lunged forward. "You can't just—" The Alpha King's power exploded outward, driving every wolf to their knees except me. Sep hit the ground hard, gasping. "I can!" Joke's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I am king. I answer only to the goddess. And she led me here, to this field, to find and what is mine." He extended his hand to me. "The old law is clear. A true mate bond supersedes all others. She comes with me now." I stared at his outstretched hand. 5 years of humiliation, of believing my body was cursed, of swallowing shame with every pitying look. 5 years of Sep's cruelty, masquerading as patience. And now a king I'd never met was claiming me. The wheat whispered around us, golden in the fading light. Sep was still on his knees, his chosen replacement forgotten. The pack that had mourned my barrenness now stared in shock. I took the Alpha King's hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm, calloused, steady, nothing like Sep's punishing grip. The moment our skin touched, something ignited in my chest. A golden thread I'd never felt before, pulling tight, right. "This isn't over," Sep spat from the ground. Joke smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. "You're correct about that." He tugged me closer, his free hand sliding to the nape of my neck. "Because I'm going to mark her right here, right now, so every wolf present can witness exactly whose mate she is." My breath caught. A marking bite was intimate, usually done in private, a moment between mates. Doing it publicly was a declaration of war. "Your Majesty," I whispered, "you don't have to—" "I want to." His thumb brushed my jaw, tilting my head to expose my throat. "I've been searching for you for months, Morgan Coates. I'm not waiting for another moment." His teeth grazed my neck, and the world exploded into gold. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a barren pack reject became the Alpha King's mate, you need to know how thoroughly I'd learned to be broken. You need to know about the 5 years that came before the wheat field, before the king, before I learned that my body was never cursed at all. Welcome back, beautiful souls. If you love werewolf romance with strong heroines, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Oh, and grab your free bonus ebook in the pinned comment below. It's my gift to you. Now, let's begin. Chapter 2. 5 Years of Poison. Morgan had worn white flowers in her hair the day she married Sep. Honeysuckle and jasmine, woven through her dark braids by her mother's careful hands. She'd stood before the pack with her heart racing, watching Sep smile at her with those warm brown eyes, and she'd believed, truly believed, that her life was beginning. That the loneliness of being the strange girl with the oracle grandmother was finally over. "You're going to be so happy," her mother had whispered, kissing her forehead before walking her to the ceremonial circle. Morgan had believed that too. The first year had been good. Sep had been attentive, affectionate even. They'd tried for a child with enthusiasm, with hope, with the certainty that came from being young and newly bonded. Morgan had imagined a dark-haired daughter, a son with Sep's easy laugh. She'd started gathering herbs for pregnancy tea, and had spoken to the pack midwife about prenatal care. But the months passed. Her cycle came with brutal regularity. "It's normal," Sep had assured her, though she'd seen the first flicker of concern in his eyes. "We're young. There's time." By the end of the second year, there was no more talk of time. The pack healer's examination room smelled of antiseptic and rosemary. Morgan had lain on the cold table while ancient hands pressed against her abdomen, probing, searching. The healer's face had been carefully neutral. "Nothing wrong that I can find," the old woman had said. "Your womb is healthy. Your wolf is strong. Sometimes these things just take time." But the treatments had started anyway. Tinctures that tasted of bitterness and made her stomach cramp. Rituals that left her exhausted and dizzy. Herbs that were supposed to open her womb, but only seemed to open a chasm of shame inside her chest. Sep's mother had arrived with the tea 3 months into the second year. "My dear," Liana had said, settling into Morgan's small kitchen with the air of someone bestowing a great gift.
"I've brought you something that helped me when I was having trouble conceiving. A special blend, a very old recipe, passed down through the beta line." The tea had been in a ceramic jar, the contents a mix of dried leaves and flowers Morgan didn't immediately recognize. Liana had insisted on preparing the first cup herself, measuring out precise amounts, explaining how it needed to steep for exactly 7 minutes. Every morning, Liana had instructed, her smile kind, but her eyes watchful. "Without fail, the magic is in the consistency." Morgan had drunk it obediently. It had tasted floral and slightly bitter, with an aftertaste that lingered unpleasantly at the back of her throat. But Sep's mother was Beta's wife, respected, knowledgeable about pack traditions. If she said this tea would help, then surely it would. She'd been drinking poison for 3 years. By the 3rd year, Sep's warmth had curdled into something else. The affection in his eyes when he looked at her had been replaced by assessment, calculation. He'd stopped touching her except when trying for an heir, and even those moments had become mechanical, dutiful, joyless. "Maybe if you weren't so stressed," he'd said once, after another failed month. "Maybe if you'd relax, let your wolf free more often." But her wolf had been free. Her wolf had been desperate, howling at the moon with a grief that had no name. The pack meetings had become torture. Morgan would sit at Sep's side, the proper place for a beta's mate, and feel the weight of their stares, the whispers that weren't quite whispers. The sympathetic looks from other mated females that had slowly transformed into something else. Pity, contempt, relief that they weren't the barren ones. "Such a shame," someone had said once, not quite quietly enough. "Sep is such a good man. He deserves better." Sep had heard. He'd said nothing, and that silence had hurt worse than any words. His mother's visits had become more frequent, always with more tea, always with advice. "Perhaps it's because of your grandmother," Liana had said delicately, during one particularly awful visit in the 4th year. "Everyone knows she was touched, cursed," some said. "Maybe it runs in the blood." Morgan had wanted to defend her grandmother's memory, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd seen things others couldn't, who'd spoken prophecies that came true more often than not. But the words had died in her throat, because what if Liana was right? What if Morgan carried some curse, some broken thing passed down through a bloodline marked by too much sight and not enough sense? "My grandmother was an oracle," she'd said weakly. "Not cursed?" Ileana's smile had been pitiful. "Of course, dear, though I suppose some people can't tell the difference." By the 5th year, Sep had stopped pretending to care. The public humiliations had started small. A comment here, a dismissive gesture there.
but they'd grown bolder. Sepp had stopped defending her when pack members made cruel jokes, had stopped including her in conversations, had begun to speak about her as if she weren't there, discussing her condition with others like she was a problem to be solved rather than his mate. "I've done everything right," he'd said once at a pack gathering where he'd drunk too much. "Chosen a mate from good bloodlines, followed all the traditions. How was I supposed to know I'd end up with damaged goods?" The laughter that had followed still echoed in Morgan's nightmares. She'd started believing it. The damage. The broken. The curse. Every morning when she'd drunk that tea, faithfully, desperately, she'd felt herself becoming smaller, less substantial. Her wolf had grown quiet, sad, a ghost inside her skin. Her magic had flickered and dimmed like a candle, drowning in wax. "Maybe I should step aside," she'd whispered to Sepp one night, her voice hollow. "Let you choose a new mate. Someone who can give you what you need." For a moment, just a moment, she'd seen something like guilt flash across his face. But it had been quickly replaced by cold calculation. "The pack would never accept a broken bond," he'd said. "It would destroy my standing. No, we'll figure this out. I have plans, Morgan. Ambitions. I'm going to be someone important in this pack, and I need an heir to secure that position. I need an heir. Not we, not us. Just him and his ambitions. And Morgan was merely the obstacle standing in his way. She'd become a ghost in her own life, moving through the days in a haze of shame and that persistent, inexplicable exhaustion. The other females had stopped meeting her eyes. The males had looked through her as if she were transparent. Even the children had seemed to sense something was wrong with her, giving her a wide berth during pack runs. Sepp's mother had continued bringing the tea. "Don't give up, dear," Liana had said just weeks ago, pressing another jar into Morgan's hands. "I have a good feeling about this month. Keep drinking, keep trying. It will happen." Morgan had wanted to believe her. Gods, how desperately she'd wanted to believe that something, anything, would change. That she'd wake up one morning and the emptiness inside her would be filled. That Sepp would look at her again the way he had on their wedding day. That she'd finally be enough. She'd been drinking the poison that morning, the day of the Alpha King's arrival. Morgan woke to the gentle rocking of a carriage and the scent of pine and winter snow. For a disorienting moment, she didn't remember. Then it all crashed back. The wheat field, the marking, the claiming. Sepp's face twisted with rage as soldiers had pulled him away. The Alpha King's words, low and certain. "You're mine now." Her hand flew to her neck. The mark was still there, raised and tender beneath her fingertips. Not a dream. Not a delusion brought on by moon's bane poisoning. Real. The carriage was luxurious. Velvet seats, thick curtains at the windows, the crest of the crown emblazoned on the door. Morgan was alone, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of cedar and something else. Something wild and cold, and definitely him. She pushed back the curtain with trembling fingers. Through the window she could see the landscape racing by. They'd left her pack's territory hours ago, judging by the changing terrain. Mountains rose in the distance, snow-capped and imposing. The royal castle. She was being taken to the royal castle, marked, mated, claimed by the Alpha King himself. Morgan's wolf stirred inside her, and for the first time in years, she felt strong, alert. The fog that had clouded her mind was lifting, though exhaustion still pulled at her bones. Whatever the moon's bane had done to her, it was beginning to fade. She remembered Sep's face, the shock, the horror, the rage that had transformed him into something ugly and desperate as he'd lunged for her, only to be intercepted by royal guards. "You can't take her! She's mine! She's my mate!" But she wasn't. Not anymore. The Alpha King's mark on her neck had severed that bond as cleanly as a knife. Morgan had felt it snap. That connection to Sep that had once been warm and hopeful, but had grown thorny and suffocating. Gone. Replaced by something else. Something vast and terrifying and absolutely certain. She touched the mark again, felt the echo of power there. The Alpha King's wolf, recognizing hers, claiming hers. Vistentu. The question was a thundering heartbeat in her chest. Why would the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the realm, who could have any female he wanted, claim a broken, barren beta's mate from a nothing pack? What could he possibly want with her? Morgan's grandmother's voice whispered through her memory. "You're going to be important, little wolf. More important than you can imagine. When the time comes, don't be afraid. Accept what you are." Her grandmother had died when Morgan was 15, but her words had lingered. Everyone had dismissed the old woman as mad, her prophecies as the ramblings of a senile wolf who'd lived too long and seen too much. Even Morgan had learned to brush aside those predictions, to ignore the strange way her grandmother had looked at her sometimes, like she was seeing not the girl before her, but the woman she'd become. Through the carriage window, Morgan saw the royal castle growing larger on the horizon. All black stone and proud towers, it perched on the mountainside like a crown itself. Beautiful and terrible and absolute. Her life had ended in that wheat field. Whatever came next, whatever the Alpha King wanted from her, Morgan had no choice but to face it. She was marked, claimed, his. The last image she'd seen before being placed in this carriage was Sep, restrained by 4 guards, his face contorted with fury, and something that might have been fear. For the first time in 5 years, he'd looked at her like she was something precious. Something worth fighting for. But it was too late. 5 years too late. The carriage rolled on, carrying Morgan toward a future she couldn't imagine, and a truth she'd been too poisoned to see. Her fingers wrapped around the Alpha King's mark, and deep in her chest, her wolf, silent for so long, finally began to sing. Chapter 3. The King's Castle. The Northern Territory's royal seat rose from the mountains like a crown of stone and ice. Morgan pressed her face against the carriage window, breath fogging the glass as she stared up at towers that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. Nothing in her life, not the modest pack house where she'd grown up, not even Sep's sprawling estate, had prepared her for this. "It's bigger than I thought," she whispered. Beside her, Joke's lips quivered. "Wait until you see the inside." The carriage rolled through gates flanked by wolves carved from white marble, their eyes inlaid with chips of amber that caught the afternoon light. Guards in silver armor saluted as they passed, their gazes curious but respectful. Morgan shrank deeper into the furs Joke had wrapped around her shoulders during the journey. "They're staring. They're curious." Joke's hand found hers beneath the furs. Their king disappeared for 2 days and returned with a queen. Of course, they're staring. Queen. The word still felt foreign, like borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. Morgan clutched the furs tighter. fingers digging into the soft pelts. The carriage stopped before a massive entrance where a semicircle of people waited. Morgan's heart hammered against her ribs as Joke helped her down, his hand steady at the small of her back. Her legs trembled from exhaustion, from hunger, from the sheer unreality of everything that had happened since she'd stumbled into that clearing. "My Lord King!" A tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair stepped forward. She moved with fluid grace, her eyes an unsettling pale gold that seemed to see straight through Morgan's skin. "We've been concerned about your absence." "Vera," Joke inclined his head. "My apologies for the worry. May I introduce Queen Morgan?" Those golden eyes fixed on Morgan with laser focus. "Your Majesty." The title sounded more like a question than an acknowledgement. What an unexpected honor. Morgan forced herself to stand straighter despite the weakness in her knees. Something about this woman, the way she held herself, the calculating intelligence in her gaze, reminded Morgan of the court politics she'd always failed to navigate. But there was something else, too. Something that made her wolf stir for the first time since the rejection. "She-wolf," her wolf murmured weakly. "Strong, dangerous. The honor is mine." Morgan managed a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "I'm sure this is all very sudden." Indeed. Vera's gaze swept over Morgan's thin frame, taking in every detail. "You look exhausted, Your Majesty. Perhaps His Majesty's enthusiasm for bringing you home outpaced concern for your comfort." "Actually," Joke's voice carried an edge Morgan hadn't heard before, "I was more concerned with getting the Queen away from those who had been harming her. Vera, have the healer summoned to the Queen's chambers." Immediately. Something shifted in Vera's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "Of course, my lord." The introductions continued in a blur. A young man with kind eyes, the castle steward. An older woman who managed the household staff. A grizzled warrior who commanded the guard. Morgan tried to remember names, to smile appropriately, to be the queen these people expected. But exhaustion dragged at her limbs like weights, and the world kept tilting at strange angles. "Enough!" Joke's arm came around her waist, supporting her weight as her knees finally buckled. "The formal introductions can wait. The Queen needs rest." He swept her into his arms before she could protest, carrying her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Morgan wanted to object, to insist she could walk, but her body had other ideas. She let her head fall against his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heartbeat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "Being weak, being a burden, being—" "Stop." The command was gentle, but firm. "You've survived things that would have broken most wolves. You're not weak, Morgan. You're standing when anyone else would have fallen." His words settled over her like a balm, but doubt still gnawed at her thoughts. What did he really know about what she'd survived? What did he see when he looked at her? A fated mate blessed by the moon goddess, or just a broken Omega who'd stumbled into his territory by accident? The chamber's Joke carried her into stole what remained of her breath. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, painted with constellations that seemed to shift and shimmer in the firelight. Windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering views of snow-capped peaks that glowed pink in the setting sun. The bed, gods, the bed, was large enough for 5 people, draped in furs and silks the color of moonlight. "This can't be for me," Morgan breathed. "These are the Queen's chambers." Joke set her down gently on the edge of the bed. They've been empty for 15 years, since my mother passed. They're yours now. 15 years. Morgan tried to imagine these beautiful rooms standing empty all that time, waiting. For what? Surely not for someone like her. A knock at the door announced the healer's arrival. The woman who entered was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp and knowing. She moved with the confidence of someone who had attended births and deaths for more years than most wolves lived. "Your Majesty?" She bowed to Joke, then turned those sharp eyes to Morgan. "I am Rachel. May I examine you?" Morgan glanced at Joke, uncertain. He squeezed her hand once, then stepped back. "I'll be right outside," he said. "Call if you need me." The examination was thorough and uncomfortable. Rachel's gnarled hands were surprisingly gentle as they probed and prodded, but Morgan still flinched at every touch. Years of invasive medical procedures, all in the futile attempt to make her fertile enough to bear sep and heir, had left her with an instinctive dread of healers. Rachel's expression grew darker with each passing moment. "How long since you've eaten properly?" I'm not sure. "A while. Months, I'd wager. You're severely malnourished." The healer's fingers pressed against the glands in Morgan's neck. "And these? When did you last have a proper heat?" Shame burned Morgan's cheeks. "I don't have heats. I'm infertile. It's why my former husband—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Rachel made a sound that might have been a growl. "Child, there's nothing wrong with your fertility, but there is moonsbane in your system." The world seemed to stop. "What?" "Moonsbane, a poison that suppresses wolf abilities, blocks heats, prevents conception." Rachel's expression was grim. "Someone has been dosing you with it for a long time. Years, from what I can tell." Morgan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Moonsbane. She'd heard of it, a rare poison used to control unruly wolves, to punish those who stepped out of line. But she'd never been unruly. She'd been obedient, submissive, everything Sep wanted. "No," she whispered. "That's not. He wouldn't." But even as denial spilled from her lips, pieces began clicking into place. The monthly supplements Sep had insisted she take to boost her fertility. The way he'd always supervised her consumption of them, growing angry if she forgot. The strange, bitter aftertaste she'd learned to ignore. "I'll need time to flush the poison from your system," Rachel continued. "But, Your Majesty, you should know, once it's cleared, your heats will return. Your fertility was never gone. It was stolen." Morgan barely heard the rest of Rachel's instructions. Her mind spun in dizzying circles, rewriting 5 years of her life through this new, horrible lens. She'd blamed herself. She'd carried the shame of being broken, of being unworthy, of failing in a wife's most basic duty, and it had all been a lie. When Joke re-entered the room, his expression told Morgan he'd heard every word. His eyes blazed with barely controlled rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, but when he approached her, his touch was infinitely gentle. "Morgan." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The full weight of what had been done to her pressed down like a physical force, crushing the air from her lungs. "He poisoned me." The words came out flat, emotionless. Shock, she realized distantly. She was in shock. For years, he poisoned me and made me think I was broken. Joke's jaw worked. "I'm going to kill him." The matter-of-fact delivery of the statement should have shocked her. Instead, Morgan felt a dark satisfaction curl in her chest. "Good. Rest now." Joke guided her back against the pillows. "We'll deal with everything else later. Right now, You need to recover." "I don't understand any of this." Morgan's voice cracked. "Why? Why would he do that? If he wanted an heir so badly?" "I don't know." Darkness flickered across Joke's features. "But I intend to find out. There's more to this than simple cruelty." He paused, seemed to wrestle with something internal, then continued in a quieter voice. "Morgan, I need to tell you something." She waited, exhaustion and shock making her feel distant from her own body. "I've been dreaming of you." Joke's thumb traced patterns on the back of her hand. "For months. Your face, your voice, your scent. I've searched everywhere, sent scouts to every territory, investigated every lead. I was starting to think you were just a phantom, something my wolf imagined." Morgan stared at him. "You dreamed of me?" "Every night. The moon goddess herself appeared in my dreams 3 months ago. She told me my fated mate needed me, that she was suffering, that I had to find her." His golden eyes met hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "She told me I was running out of time." "That's impossible." "Is it?" Joke gestured to the mark on her neck. "We're true mates, Morgan, blessed by the moon goddess herself. If she wanted me to find you, she'd make sure I could." Morgan's hand drifted to the mark, fingers tracing the twin crescents. Even now it seemed to pulse with warmth, a connection she couldn't explain. "I don't know how to be what you need," she whispered. "I don't know how to be a queen. I barely know how to be anything other than what I was." "Then we'll figure it out together." Joke pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But first, you rest, recover. Let me take care of you." The gentleness in his voice nearly undid her. Morgan nodded, suddenly too exhausted to argue. Joke helped her settle under the impossibly soft furs, and she was asleep before he left the room. She woke in darkness, disoriented and alone. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? What had happened? Then memory returned in a rush, and with it, a strange sensation low in her abdomen. Morgan sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her stomach. There, a flutter, like butterfly wings against her palm. Her wolf stirred, stronger than it had been in years, and whispered something that sounded like hope. She rose on shaky legs and crossed to the mirror. In the dim light of the banked fire, she examined the mark on her neck. Silver and gold threads seemed to shimmer beneath her skin, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. This was real. All of it was real. And somewhere deep inside, in a part of herself she'd thought dead and buried, something began to wake. Chapter 4. Awakening. Morgan stood before the mirror in her chambers, watching dawn paint the sky beyond her windows in shades of rose and gold. 3 days had passed since Joke brought her to the castle. 3 days of rest, of Rachel's medicines flushing poison from her system, of slowly believing this might be real. The flutter in her abdomen had grown stronger. Her wolf, silent for so long, now stirred with increasing frequency. And the mark on her neck, it pulsed with warmth whenever Joke was near, a constant reminder of the bond she still struggled to understand. She should have felt better, stronger. Instead, a strange pressure had been building behind her eyes since she woke, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Morgan turned from the mirror, intending to dress and join Joke for breakfast, as had become their custom. But the moment she moved, the world tilted sideways. The chamber disappeared. She was falling through darkness, through stars, through time itself. Images flashed past her in dizzying succession. A woman screaming, silver chains burning her wrists, her children running through fire, their eyes glowing white. Sep's face twisted with rage, his hand raised. A throne room filled with blood. Joke's golden eyes, but wrong, filmed with death. Her own hands cradling a swollen belly. Twins cranting in the darkness. A man she didn't recognize, speaking to Sep in hushed tones. The oracle bloodline must be contained. Moonsbane poured into wine. Her grandmother's face, young and terrified. Hide what you are, child. Always hide. Morgan's scream echoed through the vision space. She clawed at the images, trying to make them stop, to make sense of the chaos. But they kept coming, faster and faster, until she was in the garden, on her hands and knees in the dirt, gasping for air that burned her lungs. Her fingers dug into soil, grounding her, anchoring her to something real. "Morgan!" Joke's voice cut through the lingering haze. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her as the world slowly stopped spinning. Morgan blinked up at him, seeing his face overlaid with that terrible vision of death-filmed eyes. "No," she whimpered. "No, please. I'm here. I'm right here." Joke gathered her against his chest, his heartbeat solid and real beneath her ear. "Breathe with me. In, out. That's it." Gradually, the present reasserted itself. The garden with its frost-kissed roses. Joke's warmth surrounding her. The morning sun on her face. But the images still flickered at the edges of her vision, threatening to pull her under again. What happened? Joke smoothed hair back from her face. "You weren't in your chambers. I was worried. And then I heard you scream. I saw—" Morgan's voice broke. How could she explain? "I saw things. Terrible things. Things that haven't happened yet. Or maybe things that already did. I don't know." The sob tore from her throat. "What's wrong with me?" "Nothing is wrong with you." The certainty in Joke's voice made her look up. "But I think we need to talk to Vera." "Vera? The she-wolf who clearly didn't trust her?" "Trust me." Vera's chambers were unlike anywhere else in the castle. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, interspersed with strange artifacts. Crystals, bones, dried herbs hanging in bundles. The air smelled of smoke and something else. Something that made Morgan's wolf sit up and take notice. The she-wolf herself stood at a table covered in cards, her pale gold eyes assessing Morgan with new intensity. "So," she said without preamble, "the sight has awakened." Morgan's mouth fell open. "How did you—" "Because I have it too." Vera gestured to a chair. "Sit, both of you. We have much to discuss, and not as much time as I'd like." Morgan sank into the offered seat, Joke's hand finding hers immediately. Vera poured 3 cups of tea from a pot that hadn't been steaming moments before, and Morgan was too exhausted to question it. "I was cast out from my birth pack when I was 16, Vera began without ceremony. "My visions marked me as cursed, touched by dark magic. They would have killed me if I hadn't run." She met Morgan's eyes. "Your Majesty, what do you know about oracles?" "Nothing." Morgan's hands trembled around her teacup. I've never— Your bloodline was nearly hunted to extinction 200 years ago." Vera's tone was matter-of-fact, but her eyes held old pain. Oracles were feared for their ability to see truth, to pierce deceptions, to predict outcomes. Those in power found such abilities inconvenient. A coordinated purge wiped out most of the bloodlines. The survivors went into hiding. Morgan thought of her grandmother, of the strange intensity in her eyes whenever she warned Morgan to be normal, to never draw attention. "My grandmother," she whispered. She knew. Almost certainly. Vera leaned forward. The ability runs in families, but it can be suppressed, buried so deep the person never knows they have it. It's a survival mechanism, passed down through generations who learned that showing their gifts meant death. Then why is it surfacing now? Joke's grip on Morgan's hand tightened. After all these years, Vera's gaze moved to the mark on Morgan's neck, and something like satisfaction crossed her features. The mate bond. A true mate bond blessed by the moon goddess herself. That kind of power acts as a catalyst. It unlocked what was suppressed, broke down the walls your ancestors built to protect you. Morgan's free hand rose to touch the mark, feeling its warmth pulse beneath her fingers. So this is permanent? I'm going to keep having these visions? Yes, but you can learn to control them, to call them forth when needed, rather than being swept away by them. Vera's expression softened slightly. I can teach you, if you'll let me. Why would you help me? The question burst out before Morgan could stop it. You don't trust me. You've made that clear. No, Vera agreed. I didn't trust the situation. A queen appearing out of nowhere, conveniently marked as the king's fated mate. She shook her head. It seemed too convenient. But this, she gestured at Morgan. This I understand. This I recognize. You're not a schemer or a plant sent to undermine the throne. You're a terrified woman whose gifts have awakened at the worst possible time, with no preparation and no guidance. Like you were, Joke said quietly. Vera inclined her head. Like I was. No one should face this alone. Tears burned Morgan's eyes. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be any of this. A queen? An oracle? Her voice cracked. I barely know how to be myself anymore. Then we start there. Vera stood, moving to one of her bookshelves. First lesson? You must understand what you are. The visions you experienced, they're your mind's way of processing possibilities. Past, present, future, they blur together until you learn to distinguish between them. Some visions show what was, some show what is, some show what might be. How do I tell the difference? Practice, focus, time. Vera returned with a leather-bound journal. Start by writing down everything you saw, every detail, no matter how small. Then we'll begin teaching you to control when and how the sight comes. Morgan took the journal with trembling hands. The weight of it felt both grounding and terrifying. What if I see something terrible, something I can't stop? Then you'll have me to help you bear it, Joke said firmly. You're not alone in this, Morgan. Never alone. For the next week, Morgan's world narrowed to Vera's chambers and the garden where she practiced. The older she-wolf was a patient but demanding teacher, pushing Morgan to confront her fears rather than run from them. The sight isn't a curse, Vera insisted during one particularly frustrating session. It's a gift, but like any gift, it requires discipline to master. Morgan sat cross-legged on a cushion, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Easy for you to say. You've had years to practice. And every one of those years was hard-won. Vera's tone brooked no argument. Now, again, focus on your breathing. Let your mind open like a doorway. Morgan closed her eyes, following the breathing pattern Vera had taught her. In, out, in, out. The world around her faded to a distant hum. She felt herself sinking deeper, past consciousness, past thought, into that strange space where visions lived. This time, she didn't fight it. She let the sight come, let the images form and shift, like smoke. Sep's study. Two men she didn't recognize, one older, one younger, both wearing expensive suits. The older man's face was hard, calculating. "The Oracle bloodline," he said. "You're certain she's descended from it?" "My mother confirmed it before she died." Sep's voice, but younger. This was years ago. Morgan's grandmother was marked as a seer before she went into hiding. The bloodline is diluted, but present. Then the marriage must proceed. Once she's bound to the Sep family, we can ensure the bloodline is controlled, neutralized. And if her abilities surface, they won't. Not if you keep her properly subdued. The older man produced a vial of silver liquid. Moonsbane, administered regularly, will suppress any latent gifts. She'll never know what she could have been. Morgan gasped, pulled back to the present by the sheer horror of what she'd witnessed. Her eyes flew open to find both Vera and Joke watching her intently. "What did you see?" Vera asked. "They knew." Morgan's voice shook with fury. "Sep's family. They knew about the Oracle bloodline before we ever married. They did this deliberately. The Moonsbane, making me think I was infertile. It was all to control me, to suppress what I could become." Joke's growl filled the room. "I'm going to tear them apart." "Not yet." Vera's hand on his arm stopped him. "This is valuable intelligence. If the Sep family has been hunting Oracle bloodlines, working to suppress them, then there's a larger conspiracy at play. We need to know how deep it goes before we move." Morgan's mind raced, pieces clicking together. "My grandmother died when I was 12. She was healthy one day, gone the next. What if—" "Don't torture yourself with questions we can't answer yet," Vera said gently. "For now, focus on this. You controlled the vision. You held it, observed it, and pulled yourself back. That's progress." It didn't feel like progress. It felt like discovering the nightmare went even deeper than she'd imagined. But Morgan nodded, accepting the small victory. "Again," Vera commanded. "This time try to look forward. See what might come." Morgan hesitated. "What if I see something terrible?" "Then you'll be prepared." Vera's pale eyes held steady. "The future isn't fixed, Your Majesty. What you see are possibilities, not certainties. Knowing what might come gives you the power to change it." Morgan took a breath and closed her eyes once more. This time, the vision that came was different. Softer. Warmer. Wheat fields stretching to the horizon, golden under a darkening sky. An eclipse beginning. The sun's light bleeding away in stages. Morgan stood in the middle of the field, her hands cradling a swollen belly. She was heavily pregnant, gloriously so, her body full and strong in ways it had never been before. She looked up at the eclipsing sun and smiled. Her hands moved across her belly, and she felt it. Two distinct movements, two heartbeats fluttering beneath her palms. Twins. "Soon," she whispered to her unborn children. "Soon, little ones. Wait just a bit longer." The world around her thrummed with power. Her power, fully awakened, no longer suppressed or feared. She was oracle and queen, mother and warrior. She was everything she'd been told she could never be. She was whole. Morgan opened her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. But these weren't tears of fear or sorrow. They were something else entirely, hope, fierce and bright and terrifying. Your Majesty? Vera leaned forward. What did you see? Morgan's hands moved to her still flat abdomen, a gesture of protection for children not yet conceived. The future, she whispered. Our future, mine and Joke's. Joke knelt beside her chair, his eyes searching hers. Tell me. Twins. The word came out like a prayer. I saw myself pregnant with twins during an eclipse, standing in wheat fields. She met his gaze, letting him see the hope she'd been afraid to name. I wasn't afraid. I was strong, powerful, everything I meant to be. Something shifted in Joke's expression. Wonder, perhaps, or recognition. An eclipse, he murmured. There's a prophecy in my family, passed down through generations. When the sun's light fails and twins are born, the northern territories will enter a new age. Vera's sharp intake of breath drew their attention. The prophecy. I'd forgotten. She stared at Morgan with new eyes. Your Majesty, do you understand what this means? Morgan shook her head, but her hands never left her abdomen. It means, Vera said slowly, that your children are already part of destiny. That everything that's happened, the poisoning, the rejection, your escape to the north, it's all been leading to this. The weight of it should have crushed her. Instead, Morgan felt that fierce protectiveness swell in her chest. These children, these possible futures, she would fight for them. She would become strong enough to protect them, whatever it took. Then we prepare, she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. We learn everything we can. We figure out what the Sepp family is planning, and we make sure that when my children are born, they come into a world that's safe for them. Joke's hand covered hers, both of them cradling the promise of a future not yet realized. Together, he said. Together, Morgan agreed. And for the first time since her world had shattered, she believed it might actually be possible. Chapter 5. The Twin Prophecy. The royal archives occupied the oldest part of the castle, carved deep into the mountain itself. Morgan followed Vera down spiral stairs that seemed to descend forever, the air growing cooler and heavier with each step. Joke walked behind them, his presence a warm anchor against the oppressive weight of stone and history. These records go back 800 years, Vera said, her voice echoing off ancient walls. When King Aldrich first united the northern territories, he established this archive to preserve knowledge that others tried to destroy. They reached a massive door bound in silver and iron. Vera pressed her palm against it, and Morgan felt something ripple through the air. Magic, old and powerful. The door swung open silently. Inside, the archive was breathtaking. Shelves stretched into darkness beyond what torchlight could reach, filled with books and scrolls that radiated age. But Vera led them directly to a corner where a single tome rested on a pedestal, as if waiting. The Book of Convergences, Vera said reverently. Prophecies and predictions gathered by oracles over centuries. Her fingers traced the worn leather cover, including one that's haunted the Sepp family for generations. Morgan's stomach tightened. What prophecy? Vera opened the book carefully, pages crackling with age. She turned to a section marked with a red ribbon, and Morgan saw a script that seemed to shimmer in the torchlight, written in silver ink that caught and held light like captured moonbeams. Read it, Vera urged. Morgan leaned closer, the words seeming to pulse as her eyes moved across them. When oracle blood and true mate bond entwine, when moon goddess blesses the union divine, 2 souls shall emerge as one from the womb, born 'neath eclipse's shadow and moon. The 2 who are one shall bridge the divide, or tear asunder what wolves cannot hide. Unity or chaos, their choice alone. The fate of all kingdoms rests on the bone. She who carries them shall see and shall know, protected by him who wears winter's snow. But those who would stop them shall reap what they've sown. For the moon goddess guards what she's already shown. Morgan's hands trembled as she gripped the pedestal. This is about me? About my children? Oracle blood, yours. True mate bond, blessed by the moon goddess, you and Joke. Twins born during an eclipse. Vera's expression was grave. Yes, your majesty. This prophecy has been waiting for you. Unity or chaos? Joke's voice was tight. That's quite a burden to place on unborn children. It's not a burden, Vera corrected. It's a choice. The prophecy doesn't dictate which path they'll take, only that they'll have the power to choose. But that power is precisely why some families have spent generations trying to prevent this prophecy from coming to pass. Understanding crashed over Morgan like a wave. The Sepp family. That's why they wanted to marry into my bloodline. Not to gain an oracle's gifts, but to control them. To prevent the 2 who are one from ever being born. Vera's eyes glittered in the torchlight. Your vision showed you the truth. They knew about your heritage before Sepp ever proposed. They planned to suppress your abilities, keep you barren, and ensure the prophecy remained unfulfilled. Rage boiled in Morgan's chest, hot and fierce. They stole 5 years of my life, made me believe I was broken, worthless. They were afraid. Joke's hand found her shoulder, and fear makes people monstrous. Morgan turned to face him. All the truth she'd been holding finally spilling free. There's more. Things I haven't told you. The words tumbled out in a rush. The moonsbane poisoning. The deliberate sabotage of her fertility. The conversation she'd seen in her vision between Sepp and those mysterious men. They weren't just controlling me. They were trying to prevent destiny itself. Joke listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me," he said, voice rough with barely controlled fury. "No one will ever harm you again, not Sepp, not his family, not anyone who thinks they can control fate by breaking you." His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You are my mate, my queen, and the mother of my future children. Anyone who threatens, that threatens me directly." "There's more you should know," Vera interjected quietly. She produced a letter from her robes, the seal already broken. "This arrived yesterday through one of my less official channels. Intelligence from the Southern Territories." Morgan took the letter with shaking hands, scanning the contents. Her blood ran cold. "Sepp promised your firstborn to the Black Moon Pack?" Joke read over her shoulder, his growl vibrating through the stone chamber. "In exchange for their support in territorial disputes?" "An oracle-blooded heir," Vera clarified. "The Black Moon Pack has been trying to cultivate their own seer bloodline for decades. They wanted access to prophetic abilities they could control. Sepp promised them a child from your bloodline, one he could raise to be loyal to them." Morgan felt sick. "But I never conceived, because of the moon's bane." "Exactly. Sepp now owes the Black Moon Pack a debt he cannot pay. His new bride, Celeste Ashworth. She's not what she seems. Vera's expression was grim. My sources indicate she's actually a Black Moon operative. They've placed a spy in Sepp's bed, in his home, to ensure they collect what they're owed one way or another. Then he's desperate. Joke's tactical mind was already working. A desperate man backed into a corner by a powerful pack. He'll do something reckless. He already is. Vera pulled out another document. Reports indicate he's been reaching out to other packs, trying to form alliances. He's claiming you were kidnapped, Morgan, that the Northern Territories stole you away against your will. Morgan's laugh was bitter. Of course he is. He can't admit his rejected mate fled and found her true mate elsewhere. It would make him look weak. It's more than pride, Vera warned. If he can convince enough packs that you were taken against your will, he could justify a military response, claim he's rescuing his wife. Let him try. Joke's tone was deadly calm. The Northern Territories don't fall easily. But we need to be strategic, Morgan said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. The old Morgan, the one who'd spent 5 years trying to be invisible, would have panicked. But something had shifted inside her. The vision of herself pregnant and powerful, the knowledge of what she carried within her bloodline, had ignited something fierce. We can't just react. We need to be 3 steps ahead. Vera's smile was approving. Spoken like a true queen. They spent the next hour strategizing, planning for possibilities and contingencies. But eventually, exhaustion caught up with Morgan, and Joke insisted they return to their chambers. Rest, he commanded gently. Tomorrow, we'll begin preparing in earnest. But tonight, you need to recover from everything you've learned. Morgan nodded, but as they walked through the quiet corridors back to the royal wing, she found herself pulling Joke to a stop. They stood in a pool of moonlight streaming through a window, the castle silent around them. "Joke," she said softly, "I'm afraid. I know. But I'm also something else." She struggled to find the words. "I'm angry. I'm determined. For the first time in 5 years, I feel like I have a purpose, something worth fighting for." "You've always been worth fighting for." Joke's hand came up to trace the mark on her neck, and Morgan felt the bond between them pulse with warmth. "From the moment I first dreamed of you, I knew you were everything I'd been searching for." Morgan looked up at him, this man who'd saved her, who'd given her sanctuary, who'd believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. The mate bond hummed between them, alive and electric. But beneath it was something simpler. Choice. She chose this. Choose him. Not because destiny demanded it, but because her heart did. "Make me yours," she whispered. "Completely, consciously. I want to choose this. Choose you, with full knowledge of what it means." Joke's eyes darkened with desire, and something deeper, reverence. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." He kissed her then, slow and deep, a promise and a claim all at once. Then he lifted her into his arms and carried her the rest of the way to their chambers. The consummation of their bond was nothing like Morgan's previous experiences of intimacy. With Sepp, it had been clinical, obligatory, tinged with her own shame at failing to conceive. But this was transcendent. Every touch was amplified by the mate bond, pleasure cascading through her in waves that threatened to drown her. Joke was achingly gentle, despite the barely leashed hunger in his eyes, taking his time to learn every inch of her body, to discover what made her gasp and arch and cry out his name. When they finally joined, the bond snapped fully into place, with an almost audible click. Morgan felt Joke's presence in her mind, his emotions flooding through their connection, fierce protectiveness, overwhelming desire, and underneath it all, a love so pure it made her want to weep. "I feel you," she gasped, nails digging into his shoulders. "I feel everything." "I know," Joke's voice was strained. "The bond, it's stronger than anything I imagined." They moved together, building towards something Morgan couldn't name. And when release finally crashed over her, it pulled Joke with her, both of them crying out as the mate bond blazed between them like a star being born. In the golden aftermath, they lay tangled together, heartbeats slowly returning to normal. Joke traced idle patterns on Morgan's bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other, but I love you too." Morgan turned to face him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "I think I started falling the moment you found me in that clearing." They kissed again, softer now, lazy and sweet. But as Joke's hand drifted across her stomach, Morgan felt it. A shift, a change, a spark of something new taking root inside her. Her oracle sight unfurled without warning, showing her something that made her breath catch. Not a vision of the distant future, but of the immediate present. Two tiny sparks of life beginning their journey, nestled deep within her womb. Twin souls, already reaching for each other in the darkness. "Morgan?" Joke's voice was concerned. "What is it?" She grabbed his hand, pressing it firmly against her abdomen. The movement was instinctive, protective. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "Right now, this moment, I can feel it. The twins from my vision, they're real. They're starting." Joke went very still. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." Morgan's eyes filled with tears. "After 5 years of being told he was barren, after all the moon's bane and the lies and the pain, life found a way. We found a way." Joke's hand trembled against her skin. Then he was kissing her again, kissing away her tears, murmuring words of love and promise against her lips. And Morgan knew, with the unshakable certainty of oracle sight, that everything she'd endured had led to this moment. The prophecy was beginning. The two who are one had been conceived, and Morgan would burn down anyone who tried to stop them from being born. Chapter 6. The Spy Within. 3 weeks after that fateful night, Morgan sat in her first official council meeting as queen. The council chamber was imposing, a circular room with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky, stars picked out in actual diamonds that caught the light. Around a massive oak table sat Joke's most trusted advisors, military commanders, territorial representatives, economic ministers, and Vera, whose official title was Royal Seer, but whose actual role encompassed much more. Morgan tried to focus on the discussion of trade routes and border patrols, but the morning sickness that had plagued her for the past week made concentration difficult. She pressed a hand discreetly to her still flat stomach, willing the nausea to subside. "Proposal from the Eastern Valleys for a mutual defense pact," Commander Garrett was saying, his grizzled face serious. "Given the intelligence about SEP's movements, additional allies would be—" The vision hit Morgan like a physical blow. One moment she was in the council chamber, the next she was somewhere else entirely. A bedroom she didn't recognize, luxurious but unfamiliar. A woman stood at a desk, writing rapidly. She was beautiful. Dark hair, sharp features, movements economical and precise. Something about her made Morgan's skin crawl. The woman sealed a letter with red wax, no insignia. She moved to a window, opened it, and released a raven into the night. Then she returned to the desk and pulled out a second paper. This one, a detailed map of the castle, with specific areas circled in red. The water supply, she murmured to herself. During the coronation, when security is focused outward, a tasteless poison, something that acts slowly. Blame it on contamination from the crowds. Her smile was cold. Sepp will have his revenge, and I'll have my payment. The vision shifted. The same woman, but younger, standing before Sepp. His mother, Liana, stood beside him. You understand what we're paying you for? Liana's voice was sharp. Perfectly, Lady Liana. Infiltrate the northern territories, monitor the rejected mate. When the opportunity presents itself, eliminate her. The woman, Lissa, Morgan realized with a jolt, smiled. And if I can destabilize the Northern King's rule in the process, all the better. The Black Moon Pack wants results, Sepp added. We've promised them an oracle-blooded heir. Since my former wife failed to provide one, we'll offer them something better. The Northern Territories themselves. Rich lands, strong warriors. They'll forgive our debt in exchange for half the territory. Ambitious. Lissa's tone was admiring. And my fee? We'll make you wealthy beyond imagining. But the timing is crucial. Morgan must die before she can produce an heir. Before she can fulfill any prophecies or prove her value to the Northern King. Morgan gasped, jerking back to the present. She was half standing, her chair knocked backward, every eye in the council chamber on her. Your Majesty? Vera's voice cut through the concerned murmurs. What did you see? Morgan's gaze found Joke. His expression was alert, concerned, but not disbelieving. He'd learned to trust her visions over the past weeks. There's a spy in the castle. A woman named Lissa. She's working for Sepp and his mother, being paid by the Black Moon Pack to... Her voice caught. To kill me. She's planning to poison the water supply during my coronation. The chamber erupted. Commanders surged to their feet, hands going to weapons. Ministers shouted questions. But Joke's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Silence! The room fell quiet immediately. Joke's eyes never left Morgan's face. Tell me everything. Morgan recounted the vision in detail, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. When she finished, the council chamber was heavy with tension. Do we even know anyone named Lissa? Commander Garrett demanded. We do. Vera's tone was grim. She arrived 2 weeks ago, a merchant's daughter seeking refuge from an abusive mate, or so her story went. She's been housed in the guest wing. Her pale eyes met Morgan's. I had suspicions, but no proof. Until now. A vision isn't proof, objected Lord Brennan, the economic minister. With all respect to Her Majesty's gifts, we can't arrest someone based solely on... Then we test it. Joke's voice was calm, but Morgan could feel his fury through the bond. We set a trap. If Lissa is truly a spy, she'll be reporting information back to her handlers. We feed her false intelligence and see what she does with it. Vera nodded slowly. A smart approach, but we must be careful. If she's as skilled as the Queen's vision suggests, she'll be watching for exactly this kind of test. Then we make it believable. Joke turned to Commander Garrett. What if we let slip that we're moving additional forces to the eastern border? Make it seem like we're weakening the castle's defenses for the coronation because we're worried about an attack from the eastern valleys. She'd report that immediately, Garrett said, understanding dawning. And if our intelligence networks pick up movement from Sep's allies based on that false information, we'll have confirmation. Joke's smile was predatory. And we'll catch her in the act. The trap was set with careful precision. Over the next 3 days, various council members had confidential conversations within Lissa's hearing range. Maps were left carelessly visible in rooms she had access to. Servants gossiped about troop movements where she could overhear. Morgan watched it unfold through a combination of normal observation and occasional oracle sight. She saw Lysa absorbing every detail. Her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp as blades. On the 4th day, Vera's intelligence network reported movement. The Black Moon Pack was mobilizing forces toward the Northern Territory's eastern border. Several of Sep's allied packs were doing the same. She took the bait, Vera reported in an emergency council session. They're moving exactly as we predicted they would based on false intelligence. Then we move tonight, Joke decided. Garrett, have your best people watching her. The moment she tries anything, wait. Morgan closed her eyes, letting her oracle sight unfurl. Tonight. She'll try tonight. The water supply just like I saw. She has the poison already. She's been carrying it for days, waiting for the right moment. The vision sharpened, became more specific. She'll go to the eastern well at midnight. There are 2 guards, but she has a powder that will make them sleep. She thinks she'll have 10 minutes to contaminate the water before anyone notices. Vera leaned forward. Can you see if she's working alone? Morgan pushed deeper into the vision, following threads of possibility. No, there's someone else, inside the castle, someone who, her eyes flew open. Sep's mother, Lyanna Sep, is here. She's been here all along, disguised as one of the kitchen staff. She's the one who smuggled the poison into the castle. The revelation sent shockwaves through the council. How long? Joke's voice was deadly calm. How long has she been here? Since before I arrived. Morgan's hands clenched into fists. She's been watching me, waiting for Lyssa to make her move so she could report back to Sep that the deed was done. Then we take them both. Joke stood, every inch the warrior king. Tonight, we catch them in the act, and we end this threat to my mate and my children. Midnight found Morgan watching from a hidden alcove as Lysa approached the eastern well. True to Morgan's vision, the woman moved with practiced silence, a small vial clutched in one hand. The 2 guards on duty suddenly slumped against the wall, victims of whatever sleeping powder she'd used. Lyssa uncapped the vial, leaning over the well's edge. But before she could pour, guards emerged from the shadows like wolves from the forest. Garrett's voice rang out. In the name of the Northern King, you are under arrest for attempted murder and espionage. Lyssa spun. Faster than Morgan expected. A blade appeared in her hand, silver, wickedly sharp. She lunged at the nearest guard, but Joke was faster. He materialized behind her, catching her wrist and twisting until the blade clattered to the stones. You have one chance, Joke said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. Tell us everything. Who sent you, what they're planning, and where we can find Lyanna Gielson. Or you spend the rest of your very short life in our dungeons. Lyssa's laugh was bitter. You think I'm afraid of your dungeons? The Black Moon Pack is 3 days' travel away. Vera emerged from the shadows, her presence somehow more menacing than any of the armed guards. And my king asked you a question. I suggest you answer it." Something in Vera's tone made Lysa's bravado crack. "Sepp Gillison hired me," she said finally, "paid by the Black Moon Pack to eliminate Queen Morgan before she could produce an heir. The goal is to prevent the prophecy and claim the Northern Territories as payment for Sepp's debt." "And Lyanna Gilson?" Morgan stepped forward, unable to stay hidden any longer. "Where is she?" Lysa's eyes widened, seeing Morgan. How did you know?" "I see things." Morgan let her eyes glow faintly silver, a trick Vera had taught her. "I see the past, present, and future. I saw your entire plan before you even approached that well." Fear flickered across Lysa's face. "Lyanna is in the kitchens. 3rd floor, eastern wing. She's been posing as a scullery maid named Marta." Garrett immediately dispatched guards. Within minutes, they dragged a struggling woman into the courtyard. She was older, but Morgan recognized her from her visions. Sepp's mother, the architect of so much pain. "You!" Lyanna spat when she saw Morgan. "You should be dead. Broken. You were supposed to wither away in obscurity, not—" Her gaze dropped to Morgan's stomach, where the faintest curve was beginning to show. "No, no, you can't be—" "Pregnant?" Morgan's smile was fierce. "With twins, as the prophecy foretold. Your son's poisoning failed. Your spy failed. Everything you tried to do to stop destiny has failed." Lyanna lunged forward, but guards restrained her. "The Black Moon Pack won't stand for this. They'll tear your precious Northern Territories apart." "Let them try." Joke moved to stand beside Morgan, his arm around her waist. "They'll find we're not so easily conquered." As guards led both prisoners away to the dungeons, Morgan felt a flutter in her abdomen, so faint she might have imagined it, except her oracle sight confirmed what her body already knew. The twins responding to her emotions, letting her know they were there. Safe, for now. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. The coronation was moved up, the security doubled, and Morgan's pregnancy was announced to the realm. The palace erupted in celebration. Their king's mate carrying twins was seen as a sign of great fortune. But the night before the coronation, as Morgan stood before her mirror in the gown made specially for the ceremony, her oracle sight flickered to life unbidden. The great hall, filled with witnesses from every territory. Morgan in her coronation gown, the crown being lowered toward her head. Then, chaos, windows shattering. Figures in black pouring through, silver blades flashing, fire spreading across tapestries, screaming, blood. Her own blood, soaking into wheat, scattered across the floor for the ceremony. Her hands pressed to her stomach as pain ripped through her. Joke's anguished roar as he fought toward her through the melee. And standing at the back of the hall, watching it all with cold satisfaction, Sepp Gilson. Morgan gasped, gripping the vanity for support. Joke appeared at her side immediately, steadying her. "What did you see?" Morgan met his eyes in the mirror, seeing her own fear reflected back. "Tomorrow, the coronation. Sepp is planning an attack. He's coming himself." Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. "He's coming for us, for all of us." Joke's expression hardened to stone. "Then we'll be ready." But as Morgan looked at her reflection, at the crown waiting to be placed on her head, at the barely visible swell of her abdomen where 2 precious lives grew, she couldn't shake the image of blood on wheat, of silver blades descending, of everything she'd found being torn away. The prophecy wasn't just about her children's birth. It was about whether they'd survive long enough to be born at all. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. Absolutely not. Joke's voice was firm, brooking no argument. We postpone the coronation until the threat is neutralized. Morgan stood at the window of their chambers, watching dawn paint the mountains gold. She'd barely slept, her oracle sight showing her futures, branching and rebranching like a tree, growing at impossible speed. No. Morgan, I've seen it. She turned to face him, letting him see the certainty in her eyes. Every timeline where we postpone, where we hide, where we try to wait him out, they all end worse. Sep consolidates more allies. The Black Moon Pack grows bolder. The whispers start that you're afraid that your mate is too weak to be crowned. Her hand moved to her stomach. And in every one of those futures, they find a way to strike when we're more vulnerable. Joke crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders gently. You're asking me to put you in danger. You and our children. I'm telling you that danger is coming whether we invite it or not. Morgan covered his hands with hers. But if we face it on our terms, in a place of our choosing, we have a chance. What place? Vera's voice came from the doorway. The she-wolf entered without ceremony, her expression grave. Your vision showed the coronation hall in flames. Because that was the original plan, to hold it in the castle. Morgan had spent hours analyzing her visions, following threads of possibility until her head ached. But I want to change the location. Joke's eyes narrowed. To where? Morgan took a breath, knowing how this would sound. The wheat fields, where Sep divorced me. The silence was deafening. Then Joke shook his head. No, Morgan, I understand the symbolism, but strategically, it's brilliant. Vera's voice was thoughtful. An open field means no ambush points, no hidden corners. We can see threats coming from every direction. And the symbolism, her lips curved in a predatory smile. You were broken there and will be crowned there. It sends a message. It also puts Morgan completely exposed, Joke countered. I'm exposed either way. Morgan moved closer to him, willing him to understand. But in the wheat fields, I'm in a place where I've already survived my worst moment, where I was rejected and abandoned and left to die. And I didn't. I survived. I found you. I found myself. Her voice strengthened. Let Sep see that. Let all of them see that the woman they tried to destroy is being crowned queen in the exact spot where they thought they'd ended her. Joke studied her face for a long moment. Then he cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her lips. You're certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything. Then we fortify the fields. His tone shifted to tactical. Garrett, Vera, and I will need to survey the location today. Position guards, establish perimeters, identify potential attack vectors. He looked at Vera. Can your people identify which of the arriving guests are actually conspirators? Some. Vera glanced at Morgan. But Her Majesty's sight will be more reliable than any intelligence network. The Oracle gift reveals truth that spies cannot see. By midday, the castle courtyard was chaotic. Delegations from allied packs were arriving hourly. Territorial leaders, their entourages, representatives from smaller packs seeking favor. Morgan stood on a balcony overlooking the arrivals, her oracle sight unfurled, watching threads of intention and loyalty shimmer around each new arrival. Most glowed with genuine curiosity or political neutrality, golden threads that suggested no immediate threat. But some, that one, Morgan pointed to a delegation from the western shores. The man in the gray cloak, third from the left. He's been in contact with Sep. I can see the connection, like a dark thread linking them. Vera made a note. And? Morgan's sight pushed deeper. He's not here to attack, he's here to report. Troop positions, security measures, anything that might help Sep plan his assault. She watched the threads shift and flow. But he doesn't know about the location change yet. None of them do. Good. Joke appeared beside her, his presence warm and solid. We'll announce the location change at tonight's feast. Give them no time to adjust their plans. Morgan continued scanning the arriving guests, identifying 3 more probable conspirators. But it was the delegation that arrived as the sun began setting that made her blood run cold. A group of wolves in formal attire, their colors black and silver. At their head walked a man whose confidence bordered on arrogance. Alpha Christian Black Moon himself. He came personally, Morgan whispered. Bold. Vera's tone was grudging admiration. Or supremely confident in his plan. Morgan's oracle sight focused on the Black Moon Alpha, and what she saw made her stomach clench. Threads of possibility spiraled out from him, some leading to Sep, others to figures she didn't recognize. But one thread, thicker and darker than the others, led directly to her. He means to claim my children, she realized with horror. Whether Sep succeeds or fails, Black Moon intends to take the twins. That's his true goal. We need to talk, she said quietly. Now. Privately. In Vera's chambers, Morgan shared what she'd seen. The Black Moon Alpha's intentions. The web of conspiracy that extended far beyond Sep's immediate revenge. When she finished, both Joke and Vera were grimly silent. He's betting on multiple outcomes, Vera said finally. If Sep kills you, the prophecy is prevented, and Black Moon collects the Northern Territories as payment. If Sep fails but damages your forces enough, Black Moon moves in to help, and demands your children as the price. And if we repel the attack completely? Joke's voice was dangerous. Then he claims he was always loyal, always on your side. Vera's expression was disgusted. He wins no matter what happens. Unless we change the game entirely. Morgan's mind was racing. Vera, that technique you mentioned, projecting visions to others, can you teach me? In one day? Impossible. It takes years to master. I don't have years. Morgan's hand went to her stomach, where the twins seemed to pulse with energy. Teach me anyway. Even if I can only manage it once for a few seconds. If I can make Sep and Black Moon see what I see. Show them the futility of their plans. It could kill you. Vera's tone was flat. Projecting visions while pregnant, while your power is already strained from the rapid development of the twins. Morgan, your body can't take that kind of stress. Then we find another way. Joke's arm came around Morgan's shoulders. We're not risking your life or our children's. But Morgan barely heard him. Her oracle sight had suddenly exploded outward, showing her something that stole her breath. Her own body, belly swollen impossibly large. Rachel's face, shocked and concerned. Your Majesty, the babies, they're growing too fast. At this rate, you'll give birth within 2 days, Morgan whispered, returning to the present. The twins, they're developing at supernatural speed. The healer says I'll give birth in 2 days. 2 days? Joke paled. But that's the coronation day. Vera's voice was awed. During the eclipse, exactly as the prophecy foretold. Morgan felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Everything is converging. The coronation, the attack, the eclipse, the birth. It's all happening at once. That's why I can't postpone. The timing isn't just symbolic. It's destiny manifesting. Joke pulled her close, and Morgan felt his fear and determination through their bond. Then we prepare for everything at once. Vera, you'll need to be with Morgan during the ceremony in case she goes into labor. Garrett's forces will handle the external threats, and his voice hardened, I will personally ensure that neither Sep nor Black Moon touches my family. That evening's feast was tense, despite the festive decorations. Morgan sat beside Joke at the high table, acutely aware of every gaze upon her. The swell of her pregnancy was visible beneath her gown now, drawing whispers and speculation. When Joke stood to make his announcement, the hall fell silent. Tomorrow, Queen Morgan will be formally crowned, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. But we have made a change to the traditional ceremony. The coronation will take place not in the castle, but in the wheat fields of the Western Valley, the same fields where my mate was wrongfully cast aside by those too blind to see her worth. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morgan watched the conspirators, saw realization and dismay flash across their faces. They'd planned for the castle's layout, for specific vulnerabilities. This change would force them to adapt. Let all who witness tomorrow's ceremony understand, Joke continued, his eyes finding Morgan's, that my queen rose from her lowest moment to stand beside me, that she survived betrayal and cruelty and emerged stronger, and that anyone foolish enough to threaten her or our children will face the full wrath of the Northern Territories. The warning was clear. Morgan saw several conspirators exchange nervous glances. Good. Let them doubt. Let them fear. But when her gaze found Alpha Black Moon, she saw only cold calculation. He raised his glass in a mocking salute, his smile predatory. He's not afraid, Morgan realized. He still think he'll win. Late that night, after the feast had ended and guests had retired to their quarters, Morgan stood on their private balcony. The wheat fields were visible in the distance, silvered by moonlight. Tomorrow, she will stand there as queen. And if her visions were accurate, and they always were, she would also give birth there during an eclipse, while Sep's forces attacked. The sheer impossibility of surviving all three events should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange calm settle over her shoulders. You should be resting. Joke emerged from their chambers, wrapping a fur around her shoulders against the chill. I can't. Morgan leaned back against him. Every time I close my eyes, I see tomorrow. 100 different versions of tomorrow. And which version do we get? I don't know yet. Morgan's hands covered his where they rested on her stomach. The future keeps shifting based on choices that haven't been made. But I know this. We have a chance. A real chance to end this. They stood in silence for a while, feeling the twins move beneath their joined hands. Finally, Joke turned Morgan to face him. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said softly, I need you to know. You've already changed everything. Before you, I was just a king going through motions. But you made me remember what I'm fighting for. What really matters. Morgan rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring everything she felt into that contact. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. Come to bed, Joke murmured against her lips. One more night of peace, before the storm. Morgan let him lead her inside, to the massive bed where they'd conceived their children. They made love slowly, tenderly, both aware this might be their last quiet moment for a long time. Afterward, as Joke slept with one hand protectively splayed across her stomach, Morgan lay awake, watching darkness give way to dawn. The coronation day. The day everything would change. She rose carefully, not waking Joke, and moved to the window. Below, servants were already preparing, wagons loaded with ceremonial items heading toward the wheat fields, guards taking up positions. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed from the one who'd stumbled into that clearing weeks ago. Morgan touched her stomach, felt the twins respond to her touch. Then her fingers traced the mate mark on her neck. Joke's claim, the moon goddess's blessing, proof that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In her mind's eye, she saw Sep's forces moving into position around the fields, saw Black Moon's forces ready to move the moment chaos erupted, saw the eclipse beginning, shadow creeping across the sun. "Let them come," Morgan whispered to her reflection, to her children, to the dawn itself. "I'm not that broken woman anymore. I'm a queen. I'm an oracle. I'm a mother." Her eyes glowed silver for just a moment. "And I will protect what's mine." The sun crested the mountains, gilding everything in gold. The coronation day had begun. Chapter 8. The Coronation Battle. The wheat fields were luminous in the dawn light, each stalk touched with gold. Hundreds of witnesses formed a wide circle around the ceremonial space where Morgan and Joke stood, their hands clasped. The scent of summer wheat mixed with morning dew, creating something both earthy and ethereal. Morgan wore robes of silver and white that accommodated her swollen belly, the fabric flowing around her like water. The mate mark on her neck gleamed, visible to all. Joke stood opposite her in the traditional black and gold of northern kings, his eyes never leaving her face. Elder Thorn, the oldest wolf in the territories, raised his hands for silence. "We gather under the moon goddess's gaze to witness the coronation of Queen Morgan, true mate to King Joke, bearer of the prophesied twins, oracle of the bloodline, long thought lost." The formal words washed over Morgan, but her oracle sight was unfurled, monitoring the crowd. She saw the conspirators scattered throughout, trying to look casual, but their threads of intention pulsed dark and violent. They were waiting, watching. "The coronation bond," Elder Thorn continued, "will link the Queen's gifts to the King's authority, making them two halves of one ruling whole. This bond, once forged, cannot be broken by any power save death itself." He produced a ceremonial blade, silver inlaid with gold. "Your Majesty, your hand." Morgan extended her right hand, palm up. The blade was cold as it sliced across her palm, blood welling crimson. Joke offered his hand next, and the elder made a matching cut. They pressed their palms together, blood mingling as Elder Thorn wrapped their joined hands with a white cord. "As your blood mingles, so too shall your powers. Queen Morgan, do you bind your oracle sight to the northern territories to use your gifts in service of these lands and their people?" "I do." Morgan's voice rang clear. "King Joke, do you accept this bond, knowing it will tie your fate to the Queen's, your strength to her visions, your life to hers?" "I do." Power surged through their joined hands, not painful, but overwhelming. Morgan gasped as she felt Joke's presence flooding through the bond, his alpha authority massive and protective, and flowing the other direction, she felt her oracle sight connecting to him, showing him flashes of what she saw. Now, her oracle sense whispered, "It happens now." The wheat erupted with motion. Figures burst from the golden stalks on all sides, wolves in fighting forms, silver weapons glinting in the morning. Screams split the air as civilians scattered. The Allied Pack's warriors surged forward to meet the attackers, and the peaceful wheat field transformed into a battlefield in seconds. "Morgan, behind me!" Joke shoved her back, but the ceremonial cord still bound their hands. Elder Thorn fell, struck down by a blade before he could finish the ritual. Through the chaos, Morgan saw him, Sepp Gilson, emerging from the wheat with a contingent of fighters. He wore armor and carried a sword that gleamed with a sickly silver sheen. Moonsbane coating. One cut would be fatal to a pregnant wolf. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Sepp's voice carried across the battle. "You're mine, Morgan. Until death. And since you've been such a disappointment," he raised the blade, "I'll grant you that death personally." Joke roared, the sound more beast than man. But Sepp's forces were coordinated, practiced. A wave of attackers surged between them, forcing Joke to fight or be overwhelmed. "Joke!" Morgan tried to move toward him, but her swollen belly made her slow. And then, pain, sudden and immense, radiating from her core. Morgan doubled over, gasping. Not an attack. Something else. "No," she thought desperately. "Not now. Please. Not now." But her body had other plans. The twins, developing at supernatural speed, had reached their term. And with the eclipse beginning, shadow creeping across the sun, labor was starting whether she was ready or not. Another contraction seized her. Morgan fell to her knees in the wheat, still tethered to Joke by the ceremonial cord. Through their bond, she felt his panic as he sensed what was happening. Sepp laughed, cold and cruel. "How fitting. You'll die giving birth to bastards in the same field where I divorced you." The moon goddess has a sense of irony. He advanced, blade raised. Morgan tried to move, but the contractions were coming faster now, stealing her breath. She looked up to see Joke fighting like a man possessed, trying to reach her, but there were too many opponents between them. "I'm going to die here," Morgan realized with terrible clarity. "My children will die unborn, and Sepp will win." "You were always worthless," Sepp said, standing over her now. The eclipse was deepening, darkness creeping across the field. "Every day of our marriage I knew you were nothing. A broken omega, who couldn't even fulfill her most basic purpose. Die like you lived, broken and alone." Something in Morgan snapped. Not her spirit, not her will, but a barrier, some final wall her ancestors had built around the oracle gift to keep it contained. Sepp's words, his blade, the labor pains, the threat to her children, it all converged into a single point of shattering pressure. And Morgan's power exploded outward. Time seemed to stop. Every future, every past, every present possibility flooded her awareness simultaneously. She saw everything, every choice ever made, every consequence rippling forward, every thread of fate woven into the tapestry of existence. And she saw the truth. "I was never broken," Morgan said, her voice resonating with power that made the air shimmer. "I was deliberately destroyed." She thrust her free hand toward Sepp, and her oracle sight poured into him like a flood. Every moment of his betrayal, every dose of Moonsbane, every lie played out in his mind with brutal clarity. But more than that, Morgan showed him what she could have been. A powerful oracle, her gifts fully realized. Children, not just the twins, but many children, strong and gifted. A pack that thrived under her guidance, her visions protecting them from threats before they materialized. That's what Sep's family had feared. Not her weakness, but her potential strength. They'd found her bloodline, recognized what she could become, and systematically destroyed her before she could bloom. Sep stumbled back, his blade falling from nerveless fingers as the visions overwhelmed him. "No, that's not. You didn't marry me because you wanted an heir," Morgan continued, rising to her feet, despite the labor pains racking her body. "You married me to neutralize a threat. Your family has been hunting oracle bloodlines for generations, making sure we could never organize, never remember what we once were." Her eyes blazed silver. "But you failed. I survived. I found my true mate, and my children." Another contraction, stronger than before. Morgan cried out, doubling over. But even in agony, her power didn't diminish. If anything, it grew stronger. The ceremonial cord connecting her to Joke began to glow. Golden light poured from their joined hands, visible even in the eclipse's shadow. And through their bond, Morgan felt Joke's rage crystallize into something far more primal. He transformed. Not a controlled shift, but a complete surrender to his beast form. Joke's wolf was massive, easily twice the size of any normal wolf, his fur black as midnight, with veins of gold running through it like lightning. His eyes blazed with the same golden light that pulsed through the bond. The attackers between them didn't stand a chance. Joke tore through them like paper, moving with supernatural speed toward Morgan. Sep scrambled backward, finally showing fear. "Kill her!" he screamed to his remaining forces. "Kill her now!" But something strange was happening. Morgan's oracle sight, fully unleashed, was creating a visible effect. Silver light poured from her eyes, from her skin, forming a dome of shimmering energy around her. Blades struck the barrier and bounced off. Claws scraped across it, without leaving a mark. The mate bond, Morgan realized through the pain of another contraction. "It's protecting me, protecting our children." Joke reached her, transforming back to human form as he dropped to his knees beside her. His hands found hers, their joined palms still bound by the now glowing cord. "Hold on," he pleaded. "Just hold on." "The babies are coming." Morgan's voice was strained. "Joke, they're coming now. I can't." "Then we do this together." Joke's tone was fierce. "Right here, right now, while I tear apart anyone who tries to stop us." But Sep wasn't done. He'd recovered his blade and now advanced with manic desperation. "You think some light show will save you? You're still just a weak—" A figure materialized beside him. Liana Gielsen, Sep's mother, no longer bothers to hide. She carried a blade identical to her son's, both coated in Moon's bane. "Two blades," she said coldly, "strike simultaneously at different points. The barrier can't block both." Morgan's oracle sight showed her the attack before it happened. Sep and Liana moving in perfect coordination, blades aimed at her throat and heart. The barrier, powerful as it was, would fail under simultaneous strikes from opposite angles. She saw her death, saw the twins dying with her, saw Joke's anguished roar as he failed to save them. But she also saw another path. "Vera!" Morgan's voice cut through the battle. "Now!" The she-wolf appeared from the wheat where she'd been hiding, waiting for exactly this moment. Her own eyes glowed silver, oracle sight active, amplifying Morgan's power. Together, they projected a vision directly into Lyanna's mind. The future, if she succeeded. Sep crowned king of a broken territory, the Black Moon Pack betraying him the moment Morgan died. Sep executed for failing to deliver what he'd promised. Lyanna dying alone and despised, her family name a curse. But another future, too. One where Lyanna dropped her blade, where she chose differently, where mercy was extended and justice served, but not through murder. Lyanna froze, the visions warring in her mind. Her blade trembled, and in that moment of hesitation, Joke struck. He moved faster than should have been possible, grabbing Sep by the throat and slamming him into the ground with enough force to crater the earth. The Moonsbane blade flew from Sep's hand, landing harmlessly in the wheat. "You will never touch her again," Joke growled, his voice more beast than man. "You will never threaten my children, and you will spend what remains of your miserable life understanding exactly what you tried to destroy." He looked up at Lyanna, who still stood frozen. "Drop the blade, now, or I'll make your son's fate look merciful compared to yours." The blade fell. Around them, the battle was turning. Garrett's forces had rallied, pushing back the attackers. The Black Moon Pack's representatives, seeing their conspiracy failing, were trying to retreat. But Vera's wolves had surrounded them, cutting off escape. And through it all, Morgan's contractions grew stronger. "The babies!" she gasped. "Joke, I can feel them. The first one is—" Her water broke, soaking the wheat beneath her. The eclipse reached totality, plunging the field into an eerie twilight, and Morgan felt her body bearing down with irresistible force. The first twin was crowned. Joke's beast form erupted again, this time not in rage, but in protection. He positioned himself over Morgan, creating a living shield as she labored. His growls warned away anyone foolish enough to approach. Morgan's oracle sight exploded outward one final time, creating a dome of shimmering energy so bright it pushed back the eclipse's darkness. Inside that protected space, as her mate guarded her and her enemies lay defeated around them, Morgan bore down and gave birth to her first child. A girl, tiny but fierce, already crying with startling strength. "One more," Morgan gasped, barely able to see through tears of pain and joy. "One more, almost." The second twin came faster, as if eager to join her sister. A boy, slightly larger, his cries harmonizing with his sister's. Twins, born during an eclipse. In a wheat field where their mother had been broken and remade, protected by a father whose love had transcended death threats and destiny both. The prophecy, fulfilled. The two who are one, born into a world that would never be the same. Chapter 9. Two who are one. The first twin emerged into twilight darkness, the eclipse casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. But the infant girl, so impossibly tiny, yet radiating presence, glowed faintly with her own light. Her eyes, when they opened, were silver shot through with gold, and on her tiny neck, barely visible, was a mark that mirrored the one Joke had given Morgan. The oracle's mark, born into her skin. "A girl," Morgan sobbed, cradling the infant against her chest with shaking hands. Around them, the protective dome of oracle sight pulsed brighter, responding to the newborn's presence. She's perfect." But there was no time to rest. The second twin was already coming. Joke remained in beast form above them, a living fortress. His growls had taken on a different quality, not threatening now, but protective. Rumbling comfort meant to soothe his laboring mate. Every few seconds, he'd snap at approaching fighters, reminding them that death waited for anyone foolish enough to breach his guard. Morgan bore down again, her body moving on pure instinct. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything she'd experienced. But through it, she could feel her oracle sight showing her flashes of the future. Her children grown, strong, united. These twins who would change everything. The boy came in a rush, larger than his sister, his cries joining hers in perfect harmony. And when his eyes opened, they blazed pure alpha gold, not the diluted gold of most alpha wolves, but the ancient primal gold of the first alphas. Power radiated from him in waves that made the wheat around them bow as if in wind. "Orion," Morgan whispered, the name coming to her through oracle sight. "And Selene." The twins' cries synchronized, rising in pitch and power. And then, a shockwave. Pure, undiluted authority poured from the newborns in concentric rings. It wasn't violent, it wasn't painful, but it was utterly irresistible. Every werewolf within range, friend or foe, alpha or omega, felt their knees buckle. Warriors froze mid-strike. Attackers dropped their weapons. Even Joke, powerful as he was, felt the compulsion to submit to his own children. The battle simply stopped. All across the wheat field, wolves collapsed to their knees. Some bowed their heads. Others stared in awe at the glowing protective dome where Morgan held her newborn twins. The combined aura of oracle sight and alpha authority made it impossible to do anything but acknowledge their power. Sepp Gilson, still pinned by two of Garrett's warriors, stared at the twins with an expression that cycled between hatred, fear, and something that might have been despair. His mother, Liana, had fallen to her knees as well, her blade forgotten in the wheat. Morgan looked down at her children, Orion with his blazing gold eyes, Selene with her silver gold gaze, and felt something settle in her chest. Not just love, though that was overwhelming, but certainty. These children were exactly who they needed to be, who the world needed them to be. "It's over," she said softly. But her voice carried across the silent field. "The battle is over." Slowly, Joke transformed back to human form. He knelt beside Morgan, his eyes filled with wonder as he looked at his children. "They're everything," Morgan finished. "They're everything." Elder Thorne, bloodied but alive, staggered forward. "The coronation," he said hoarsely. "We must complete it." The ritual was interrupted, but with the twins born, he looked at the infants with something like reverence. With them present, the bond will be even stronger. Morgan nodded wearily. She was exhausted, bleeding, her body screaming for rest. But she could feel through her oracle sight that this moment mattered, that completing the coronation now, with her newborn twins present, would set the tone for everything that followed. "Help me up," she said to Joke. "Morgan, you just gave birth. I know what I just did." She met his eyes. "And I know what comes next. Help me stand." With Joke's support, Morgan rose on shaking legs. Vera appeared, taking Orion gently while one of the healers took Selene. The women positioned themselves on either side of Morgan, holding the twins so they faced the assembled crowd. The eclipse was ending, light returning in stages. And as the sun's rays broke through, they illuminated a scene that would be painted and sung about for generations. A queen standing in blood-soaked wheat, flanked by newborn twins whose power had stopped a war, her mate's mark blazing on her neck like a brand. Elder Thorne raised his voice, projecting to every corner of the field. The ritual was interrupted. The queen gave birth to the prophesied twins while defending her right to rule. Let any who doubt her strength speak now. Silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, by the power vested in me by the moon goddess and the old laws, I complete the coronation bond. He gestured for Morgan and Joke to join hands again, their palms, still bearing the ritual cuts, pressed together. Queen Morgan, your gifts are bound to these territories. Your sight shall guide. Your strength shall protect. Your children shall unite. He placed a crown on her head, simple silver worked with gold but radiating power. Rise, Queen Morgan of the Northern Territories, Oracle and Mother, Mate and Ruler. May your reign bring the dawn of a new age. A roar went up from the northern wolves. Even some of the former attackers, still on their knees, seemed moved by the moment. But not everyone was celebrating. Sepp Gilson, dragged forward by Garrett's warriors, spat blood at Morgan's feet. This changes nothing. You're still the broken Omega I divorced. Crown or no crown, Morgan's hand rose, cutting him off. She looked down at the man who'd tormented her for 5 years, who'd poisoned her body and spirit, who'd tried to kill her and her children. And instead of hatred, she felt pity. Her oracle sight unfurled, showing her Sepp's past. A boy beaten by his father for showing weakness. A young man groomed by his mother to value power above all else. A wolf taught that love was weakness and cruelty was strength. Layer upon layer of generational abuse, each generation damaging the next. You were a victim too, Morgan said softly. Before you became a victimizer, you were broken by the same system that tried to break me. Sepp's eyes widened. Don't you dare! I see it all, Sepp. Every moment your father told you compassion was weakness. Every time your mother rewarded cruelty and punished kindness. You were taught that domination was the only path to respect. Morgan's voice carried across the field. And you believed it. You lived it. You tried to pass it on. She knelt, bringing herself to his level. I could execute you. It would be just. You tried to murder me and my children, but that would only continue the cycle. Then what? Sepp's voice cracked. What punishment could possibly... Morgan placed her hand on his forehead, and her oracle sight poured into him, but not visions of horror or death. Instead, she showed him every choice he could have made differently. Every moment, he could have chosen kindness over cruelty, love over domination, growth over stagnation. A Sepp who got therapy for his trauma instead of perpetuating it. A Sepp who chose to break the cycle rather than continue it. A Sepp who might have been a good mate, a good alpha, a good man, if only he'd chosen differently at key moments. And with those visions came awareness. Complete, devastating awareness of every destroyed possibility, every future he'd sacrificed on the altar of his pride and cruelty. This is my curse, Morgan said, pulling her hand away. You will live with complete knowledge of what you could have been. Every day, you'll wake up understanding exactly how different your life could have been if you'd chosen differently. You'll feel the weight of all those destroyed futures pressing down on you. Sepp's scream was wordless, agonized. His hands clutched his head as the curse took hold. No, please, make it stop. It won't stop, Morgan said without malice. That's the point. You wanted me to live with pain, with shame, with the constant knowledge of failure? Now you will. But unlike what you did to me, I'm giving you the truth, and truth Sep, is the chance for redemption." She stood, turning away from him. "Take him to the dungeons. He'll be held there until we decide his final fate. But he lives. His mother, too. Let them both face what they've done." Garrett's warriors dragged Sep away, his screams fading into the distance. Lyanna Gilson, watching her son's breakdown, looked at Morgan with something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. "You're more merciful than I would have been," she said quietly. "I'm not being merciful." Morgan's tone was matter-of-fact. "I'm being strategic. Your family has spent generations hunting oracle bloodlines, trying to prevent prophecies. Killing you would make you martyrs. But this," she gestured to Sep's retreating form, "this makes you cautionary tales." Lyanna's laugh was bitter. "Perhaps you are fit to be queen after all." The aftermath took hours to organize. The injured were tended. The dead were counted. Fewer than Morgan had feared, thanks to her children's power stopping the battle before it could truly escalate. The Black Moon Pack's representatives, including Alpha Christian himself, were taken into custody. Lyssa, the spy who'd tried to poison the castle, was brought before Morgan in chains. The woman who'd once moved with such confidence now looked broken, terrified. "You have information we need," Vera said without preamble. "About the conspiracy. About who else was involved. About what other threats might be waiting." Lyssa nodded frantically. "I'll tell you everything. Names, locations, plans, everything I know. Just—" She looked at Morgan with desperate eyes. "Just don't curse me like you did Sep Gilson. Please." Morgan studied her through Oracle sight, seeing not just what Lyssa was, but what she could be. A woman who'd taken a dark path, yes, but one who could choose differently going forward. "Testify truthfully," Morgan said. "Hold nothing back, and when your testimony is complete, you'll be exiled from these territories, but free to start over elsewhere." She paused. "Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, Lyssa, even you, but only if you choose it." Lyssa collapsed in relief, nodding through tears. As sunset painted the wheat field in shades of gold and crimson, Morgan stood with Joke and their twins at the center of what had been a battlefield. The crowd had thinned, but those who remained represented every pack in the territories. Witnesses to history. Joke held Orion, who'd fallen asleep with one tiny hand fisted in his father's shirt. Morgan cradled Celine, who gazed up at her mother with those uncanny silver-gold eyes. "I have a declaration to make," Morgan said, her voice amplified by her oracle power so all could hear. "The old ways end here. Today, now." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morgan continued. "Women will no longer be measured solely by their fertility. A wolf's worth is not determined by their ability to produce heirs, but by their character, their strength, their choices." More murmurs, some approving, some uncertain. "Mates will be chosen freely, not assigned by parents seeking political advantage, not forced by those who see people as commodities. The moon goddess grants fated mates as gifts, not chains. And those who don't find fated mates will be free to choose their own partners without shame." Vera was nodding, a fierce smile on her face. Others looked thoughtful. "The strong will protect the vulnerable, not dominate them, not exploit them. True strength is measured by what you protect, not what you conquer." Morgan's eyes found the faces in the crowd. "These are the principles my children will grow up under. These are the principles that will guide the northern territories. And any pack that wishes to ally with us must accept them. And if they don't, someone called from the crowd. Morgan's smile was sharp. Then they can explain to my twins why they believe it might be right. Celine and Orion will be very curious to hear those arguments. Laughter rippled through the crowd, because everyone had felt the twins' power. Everyone knew that when these children grew up, they would be forces of nature. Opposing them would be unwise. Joke raised his free hand, calling for silence. My queen has spoken. Let the word spread to every territory, every pack, every lone wolf. The old age is ending. A new one begins. He looked down at Orion, then over at Celine in Morgan's arms. And it begins with them, the two who are one. Unity and prophecy made flesh. The crowd erupted in howls, the traditional wolf song of celebration. The sound rolled across the wheat fields, carrying news of change to the territories beyond. Morgan looked up at Joke, seeing the same wonder in his eyes that she felt in her heart. They'd survived. Against all odds, through every threat, they'd survived. And more than that, they'd won. Not through violence alone, though there had been violence. Not through power alone, though they had power, but through choice. Through the decision to be better than those who'd hurt them. To build something new rather than perpetuate something broken. Ready for what comes next? Joke murmured. Morgan looked down at Celine, who'd fallen asleep in her arms. Looked over at Orion, peaceful against his father's chest. Felt the mate bond humming between her and Joke. The oracle's sight showing her glimpses of their future. Challenging, yes, but also beautiful. With you? Morgan smiled. Always. The sun set fully, leaving the wheat field in twilight. But in Morgan's oracle sight, she could see the dawn already approaching. A new day, a new age. The prophecy was fulfilled. The two who are one, born into a world that would never be the same. And at the center of it all, a queen who'd been told she was broken, learning the most important truth of all. She'd never been broken. She'd been transforming, becoming exactly who she was always meant to be. If you don't subscribe, you'll miss tomorrow's story. And trust me, it's even better than this one. Hit that button and grab your free bonus in the pinned comment. See you tomorrow.